Welcome, everybody, to Vision Untethered Conversations with Inspirational Leaders. My name is Jill Simonds. I am founder of Savvy Strategic Partners, a dedicated leadership team of fractional executives who are executing vision, increasing business value, and helping founder business owners realize freedom. Our guest today is Rimi Chakraborty, co-author of Beyond Resilience to Root Zillions. She has successfully translated the ancient teachings of her Indian roots to the corporate world to align company mission with purpose. Her passion to lead mindfully stems from leaving a prestigious management consultant gig in Boston to owning and operating a retreat center in the Azores, Portugal. In addition to teaching chakra-based yoga and meditation, Rimi consults with Fortune 500 companies, does one-on-one leadership coaching with executives, and runs retreats and workshops throughout the year. Lots of amazing things you're doing in this world, Rimi. I am so excited to have you and to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jill. What an honor.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for being here. And especially at whatever hour it is at the moment in Portugal, it's probably
Yeah, and
into
it's
your
not too
evening.
bad. Not too
Good.
bad. It's about 3:45, so we're about 6 hours ahead of you, I think.
Okay, good. So it's the tail end of your Friday. So
Yeah.
you're probably in a good spot. Yeah, this will just like sail you right into the weekend.
Exactly.
Great. Well, first and foremost, what inspired the journey into business ownership and what you've led, and the choice specifically in the industry you serve now?
Oh, wow. Well, I was inspired first and foremost through my own journey, which I'm sure we'll touch on a bit deeper, but I
Hmm.
often felt that I had to do more, in my life, meaning going to school, always working hard to get the good grades, and then in college, working hard to be successful, and then getting a quote unquote good job. And, I did all these things. I went to these Ivy League universities. I got the job on Wall Street out of college. I worked my way to the top
Yeah.
and was really part of this hustle culture of pushing harder and more and focusing on more.
Yeah.
And I discovered in that process that, yes, it served me in terms of, climbing the corporate ladder, gaining in name and reputation, but it also led me to a deep lacking of purpose and a deep sense of burnout.
Hmm.
And it was in that process that I recognized two things. One, I was chasing someone else's dream. And two, I didn't have to chase someone else's, that I could actually define, design, and live my own.
Yeah.
And that led me to be an entrepreneur, move to the Azores, and then that led to another pivot, which is getting into the coaching and consulting work, which I'm sure we'll touch on as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like my soul sister, same journey, mindset, I think, in younger years. You and I touched on this too initially before we were talking about recording a podcast in the first place. So that's all
Yeah.
coming back to me, and that conversation that we align so much on what got us to where we are now and as
Mm.
entrepreneurs and business owners,
Mhm.
because yeah, I mean, you just described me as well in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. Like, it wasn't until a point of burnout and kind of half dipping my foot and my toe into entrepreneurial endeavors on the side of full-time careers, I felt like I had to have that security and this kind of um, facade, if you will, of safety,
Yeah.
building somebody else's dream. And I was even
Yeah.
reflecting on this a little bit, how it ties into my story. Someone asked, just when they ask, like, okay, what's your story? How'd you get there? What led you to
Yeah.
that? I said the same exact thing here. I was betting everything on someone else's dream. I
Mm.
was making somebody else wealthy, and
Mm.
that couldn't be my purpose. I was so empty, even
Yeah.
though there was this amazing organization and these results and these accolades to kind of, put on my cap. it
Hmm.
it still was soul sucking. So I can totally
Yeah.
relate to that and
Yeah.
just similar story and journey. So I'm especially excited to dive into that a little bit with
Yay.
you. So along your journey, what's a pivotal realization, a learning or discovery that you encountered throughout that journey, and how did then addressing your purpose and seeking your true purpose shape the growth and how you strategize moving forward and betting on yourself?
Yeah, I would say that a key pivot was starting to see my inner voice, particularly the inner critic, the voice that would doubt me, especially when I was leaving a stable job and on my way to making partner and on paper was super successful. And even my closest friends and including my parents thought I was absolutely nuts to be leaving all of that to go what they
Yeah.
thought was like a bed and breakfast. And so I remember there was, yeah, and I was freaked out by it too. And the voice was really loud. And the voice said things like, are you going to make enough to make a living? What if it flops and you have to go crawling back? And would anybody even hire you again? And, what about the resume gap? Everyone's always worried about. At least then they were. I don't know if that's the case now, but so that the pivot for me was in realizing for after a long time of ignoring the voice was through my meditation, mindfulness, and yoga practices that are a huge part of what I teach now. I
Hmm.
was able to create some space between that voice and my former reaction, which was to numb it or compartmentalize it or
Yeah.
silence it in some way. And realizing that, wait a minute, this voice was just a part of me that was really scared.
Mm,
And it needed some assurances that things were going to be okay. And it deep down was trying to help out, just not in the not in the most helpful
yeah.
ways. And what was interesting is that as I began to give this voice some space, some might call it the inner saboteur or your imposter, your inner imposter.
Yep. Hmm.
I started to give it some space and then started to address it, particularly through journaling and
Yep.
writing as if I was writing to this part of me and just opening up a dialogue that was an incredible experience of having almost like an automatic writing where I was like, who's the one writing right now? Is it me or is this, what's happening? And realizing that this voice needed these assurances around, okay, well, what's your exit strategy? What are you going to do? Step one, step two, step three. And once I started to create that, this voice actually became an ally.
Hmm.
And so that was a huge
Wow.
pivot because then I started to realize, and this is a process of self-inquiry that I've
Hmm.
used since the pandemic when our business completely shut down for at the time we didn't know how long it was going to be shut down for. It ended up being about
Right.
4 months.
Hmm.
And that same process of, okay, let me sit with all of myself, not just the parts that I want to show to the world or that I want to be likable, or back to the beginning of our conversation and our shared journey of um, feeling enough is that deep down it comes down to feeling enough.
Yep.
And, what was enough for this part?
Oh man, that's beautiful. Yeah. So pivotal. So what were some indicators for you that you were deeply tied to this kind of internal question of being enough, good enough? And then
Um,
how has that shaped in creating that space, right? How are you utilizing that now as a tool as opposed to a hindrance for you?
yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so a big part of why that voice exists and why that being enough, and we all have our different reasons, but for me, it was growing up in, what was a pretty dysfunctional home as an adolescent, where
Mm.
my mom was an alcoholic and
Mm.
I am an only child. And so there was
Okay.
a lot of pressure. And I remember now I can look back and realize that I had associated doing more and being perfect with being lovable. And I deep down thought that, well, if I just get the perfect grades and I do everything right and I'm super responsible, and I was even taking care of my mom because that was the dynamic that played out. But if I just did everything just perfect, then she would get better and my dad would be around and our family would be happy again. And, of
Mm.
course, that was mis a big misunderstanding, but kids,
Mm.
that's how we interpret the world. And it's incredible how that was a huge part of my subconscious
Yeah.
patterning, my belief system. And so I
Yep.
kept thinking that in order to be liked, I had to be successful or I had to be perfect. And so
Mm-hmm.
the indicators for me were I started to notice that my body was showing me that I was just overdoing it. I kept getting these infections and I kept treating the symptom and not the cause. I kept
Mm-hmm.
popping antibiotics and deep down I was feeling this sense of purposelessness when I was in my management consulting job and
Yeah.
I kept ignoring it and it would come up in the form of busying myself. And so I had every back-to-back minute that I had free was booked with social engagements, outings, parties, calls, you name it. I couldn't just be. I had a
Yep.
really hard time being. And so all of these things were showing up for me. And it was in the journey to becoming an entrepreneur that really had me redefine how to listen to those indicators, those
Mm-hmm.
emotional, those physical, those spiritual, even, like how we connect with the parts of us. It had me listen to those indicators so that I was not ignoring and I started to recognize, okay, how do I change? How do I live more holistically? How do I honor my values?
Mm. So incredible. My mind is blown by how similar our lives and background is. And I don't think we had touched on growing up in alcoholic homes when we first met. So both of my parents were alcoholic as well,
Mm,
pretty widely spread across my whole family. Um,
mm,
and so the exact same things. It was straight A's. It was if I perform, if I'm really, everything I did, it was only worthwhile if I did it perfectly.
mm,
Because what sort of attention or what sort of love am I worthy of
yeah,
if I'm not doing it 100% and I'm not really good at it? So, my internal question, right? If you know the seven primal questions, I'm sure there's tons of other kind
mm,
of like true philosophies around what is it internally each of us are trying to answer that drives our
yeah,
motivators, that drives why we do what we do, how we show up,
mm,
the limitations and the saboteurs. Is that good enough? That good enough stamp of approval on myself that I battle every single day. Right? Like it is
yeah,
still just like less and less, or it's improving, and I'm aware of it now where I wasn't all those years of striving for
yeah,
love, attention, any sort of acknowledgement in who I am outside of that origin family need. Was if I'm
wow,
doing straight A's, if I get a degree, oh, I'm going to get a master's degree too. I'm going to just constantly be moving. I cannot stop. I will not
yeah,
stop until I am perfect at this, until I've
yeah,
received the gold star, and so much of my entrepreneurial journey with you too is shedding that,
yeah,
layer of just yeah, just an empty void, purposeless drive
yeah,
to feel,
yeah,
just this sense of like, yeah, you are good enough at this. Like, do I want to be at
yeah,
my deathbed and finally be like, well, I guess I was good enough to do that now. Like, what am I waiting for?
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
to
Yeah,
just do the
yeah.
thing.
Wow.
And yeah, so
Oh,
it's
that's so well said,
incredible how
Jill.
similar,
Yeah.
yeah, that rooted, just that root in how each of us kind of followed in that journey. It's amazing. Right? It's incredible.
Yeah, and I think it's the case for most high performers, and
Yes.
maybe the reasons are different. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited to hear that we share that
Mm-hmm.
dysfunctional adolescence. And I'm
Oh,
sorry
yeah.
that part of your life. And I hope that, yeah,
Same.
it's clearly led to some incredible
Exactly. Yeah.
motivation. And
Mm-hmm.
I will say now my family, we've gotten past that dark phase. And I think it
Mm,
was in
good.
realizing connection between what made me successful was also my biggest wound of that primal question that you were just speaking about. Am I
Right.
enough?
Right.
And I think that what started to help me recognize that I was enough. And yes, I also struggled with being enough, even though I was, teaching this. And it's something that I think will always be that sort of gear turning in the back of the head, so to speak, or deep in the heart. And what shifted it for me was when I wrote my book, because that was such a goal for me in my life, and
Hmm.
particularly noticing what happened after. So I was a bit
Yeah.
of this mindset of when I write the book, then everything will be amazing. It already was amazing, but I just have this concept in my head or this ideology that, oh, once I write the book, then I'll have these, sold out programs and people will be showing up for my courses left and right and it'll just happen. And I wrote the book and it was an incredible experience. I wrote it with a wonderful woman. We collaborated and it was impactful. We had a book tour, we did all these wonderful things. And
Hmm.
then about, 6 months, 8 months later, it started to feel like, okay, so now what? And I
Yeah.
couldn't believe that I was there again. I couldn't believe that I felt like, then there was like, oh, well, I should give a TED talk. Oh, and I should start doing this. And then, oh, now I have to write my next book. And there was this another mountain to climb. And I was able to stop myself and notice the contrast between, oh my gosh, I had put these expectations
Yeah.
on the book and on the out there. And for some people,
Yep.
it's, oh, when I have a kid or when I find a partner or when I am this much weight or when I'm this, whatever, physical
Yep.
appearance or when I have this job or when I have this house. But this chase of out there is a
Hmm.
myth. It's a
Yeah.
total myth. And I would say that experience coupled with my spiritual and devotional practices around realizing that that which we seek is already within us.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different philosophy and a way of thinking. And it's one that I've been able to weave into my work and my being. And
Mm.
it really has been a deep cultivation of contentment and
Yeah.
abundance. Abundance, not as, oh, how much more wealth can I generate, but abundance as clean water and fresh air and healthy land. I mean, we grow our own food. We literally go grocery shopping in the backyard. I collect spring water, which is some of the highest quality water that you can drink. And the fact that we can just drink it from a mountain spring right here, 20
Yes.
minutes away, is amazing.
Yeah.
And being able to be healthy and feeling
Hmm.
that I'm enough is based not on what someone else is telling me, but the knowledge, the not just the head knowledge, but the whole body yes of,
Hmm.
hey, I'm doing what I care about.
Yeah.
I'm happy with who I am, and I've developed metrics of success for myself to remind me if I ever start going off into, what everybody else is being pushed into, which is
Mm.
all the inundation of, oh, you need to be this and more and whatnot.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, it's internal within ourselves, the answers we're seeking and the validation and the love is
Yeah,
already within us and in a well within us abundantly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Such a, yeah, it's a dynamic shift in our understanding of ourselves and what we're needing just in truly validating our existence and our being, and
yeah, yeah.
love that. Can you maybe share an experience too where you felt trapped by your business? What it is you've created and what strategies you implemented to create space for growth and
Yeah.
scalability?
Oh, absolutely. So I live at our center. So we have a 1 acre piece of land and we host guests throughout the year, sometimes as independent
Hmm.
travelers, like you would book
Hmm.
on a hotel site or a Airbnb or booking. And
Right.
then oftentimes we're hosting retreat groups. And
Hmm.
we also live on the property. So at first we were very much on display, if you will, meaning I had shifted into some of this work where I'm now doing leadership consulting and one-on-one
Yeah.
coaching. And I would get off of an intense call, need a break, and step outside. And I would immediately see a client or a guest down the hall who'd say, oh, hi. And they'd wave at me and then they'd come over and then I'd be on with them. And this was happening again and again and again. And it was absolutely exhausting. And it was a huge transition because my husband and I started the business together and
Hmm.
we it was very much our baby and we built Mina Vida Orchard Lodge as a place where people could connect, and so we led people on hikes and in experiences, and so when we were with our guests we were really with them. We're not just a place to stay, it's we really also were guiding them into experiences and really into themselves.
Yeah.
And so when people would see us, it was hard to create those boundaries. And so what ended up happening were two things. One was very practical, which was we literally built a fence between our side of the property and the main property. And now
Yeah.
most guests don't even know that we live here unless we
Mm.
tell them because it's not obvious. So
Okay.
that was huge, that visual separation. And I'm telling you, that was one of those things where, I mean, I was ready to throw in the towel and sell the business. And it created a lot of conflict in my marriage, of course, where I just felt like I can't do this. I have no place where I can just be at ease. And it literally came down to building a fence. And so, for anyone who's listening who's feeling like they're at a crossroads, sometimes the answer is much simpler than you think.
Right.
Um,
Like just literally build a boundary, a physical boundary
yes,
in
a
some
literal
way.
boundary. And then
Yes.
the second piece was in transitioning from both of us running the business into what we are doing now. We had to, where my husband's running the business and I stepped into this new role. We had
Mhm.
never formally redefined roles and responsibilities. We had never formally set boundaries on when I'm available and what I'm available for. And we had never
Mhm.
communicated it to our staff. And so that also was something that was a huge part of making space for me and realizing that I was showing up a different way in
Yeah.
my career than I was before. And that enabled him to know what I needed and then me to see where I could still play a role. Where was I needed? What aspects of my talents and gifts were going to be meaningful, and which ones could we have our staff do, and which ones weren't necessary anymore.
Yeah. Doesn't need to be super complicated.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes it is the simple things, but when we determine at the root what is causing chaos or um, tethering us,
Yeah,
sometimes the
yeah,
answers really are quite simple in terms of a solution. It's hard work. It still means it's
yeah,
hard work to properly train, to delegate, to set those boundaries, to hold those boundaries, to show up where you need
yeah,
to and not show up where, it's pulling you away from where, the priority and maybe your core genius actually shines.
yeah.
It is
No,
hard
absolutely.
work, but the answers are fundamentally quite simple.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think
Wow.
that piece around the maintaining of those boundaries was is probably also very relevant to your listeners because
Hmm.
then it came down to, so we had decided on roles and responsibilities, but then it came down to, as you mentioned, delegation and trust. So, for example, I would walk
Hmm.
around and notice something and then suddenly decide that, oh, I was going to focus on that. And I would get really upset. Oh, this hasn't been done right, or this hasn't been done the way we agreed. And I would
Yeah.
assume that my husband hadn't been on top of it, or and suddenly insert myself and go speak directly to the staff. And that created conflict. And it could be whether you work with your partner, whether you have business colleagues and friends
Right.
that you're working with. It's respecting those roles and giving people space to step up. Because what I could have done, and now what we identified, and now what we do is we have a weekly meeting. And because it's also our, it is our relationship, we
Hmm.
need to know, I needed to know what was going on, and he needed to know that I could trust him. And
Hmm.
so that is part of our weekly meeting. And also around, hey, when are we going to get together for date night and make time for each other so that we're not
Yeah.
just getting together and talking about work all the time, which that's a whole
Right.
nother thing.
Totally.
And so that piece has been really important. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, another fence right there. It's
Mhm.
like another
Yeah.
fence
Yeah.
between business. My husband's in on our business together too, and so there definitely is a separation needed, or just protected intentionality and space for when we talk about business and when we don't, because
Yeah.
we all also both work remotely out of an office, and so that separation from our home also doesn't exist, where I have an office, he has a designated office, but then sometimes we're, you know, discussion and kind of space never feels like we leave. And so it's so
Yeah.
vital
Yeah.
to be aware of that and to intentionally protect it, for sure. I can relate to that. I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the book Beyond
Yeah.
Resilience to Root Zillions. What are some of the common psychological barriers that prevent entrepreneurs, or the obstacles that you've identified in this, and talk a little bit about what the book itself and what it's solving for and helping
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that
That's a great
mindset.
question. Yeah. So Beyond Resilience to Root Zillions is really developed to address the challenge specifically for women, because we do write about and show evidence on how women are affected differently, and also how there are still only 30% of women leaders in the world, even though that's the highest ever. But this is available for everyone. It really applies to anyone looking for a holistic framework for leadership. But the main problem it addresses, and this is a really exciting one, is that we've always known that our body tells us when we're off. Our body will show us when we're overdoing it. You've
Mm-hmm.
often heard people, and I think even on your show, people say, God, I hit that burnout and that was my wake up call.
Yeah.
And the what this book does is, for the first time ever, we created a tool that allows each reader to identify specifically what his or her unique signs of balance or dis-ease or unease is, and then what to do about it. So
Mm.
not just, oh yeah, my body's showing me that I'm stressed. It's like, okay, well, it's specifically in this area. And what we've done is tie the ancient chakra system,
Yeah.
which you beautifully pronounced my name. Thank you. Chakraborty has everything to do with the
Oh, I
chakras,
love
or the
that.
wheels of energy.
That's a cool
Um,
name too. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And the if whether or not you're a believer in chakras, it's a lens through which to understand emotional, physical, and subtle body or behavioral aspects of who you are. And so we
Mm-hmm.
map the chakra system to positive psychology, the via
Mm.
character strengths. And so
Right.
that's never been done before. And so based on that, people can now identify, oh, wow, that nagging migraine that I have, or that stomach upset that keeps coming up, or oh, I often find myself feeling lonely, or I have to do it by myself, or I get
Mm.
stuck in, I've got to make everyone else happy. Those aren't just general tendencies, they're specific to you. And then the book goes through solutions based on three branches. So one is conscious leadership, one
Yeah.
is mind body integration, and one is healing foods. And so those three branches offer a set of tools. So the
Mm-hmm.
book is really, it's like a personal development course in a book. It's essentially your guide to going past this pursuit of more that we were talking about, and it's
Mm-hmm.
solving for the problems around feeling like we have to ignore our body, we have to ignore our emotions or our behavior, and it has to get so bad that we end up collapsed or in a hospital or some other disease until we actually wake up. And so that's why it's beyond resilience, because resilience is getting stretched to our limits, but we can bounce back. And we're not bouncing back anymore. And Jill, you know this. We've got a mental health crisis. We've seen so many women leaving the workforce because of overwhelm. We're
Mm-hmm.
missing out on what is possible because we're just inundating people with so much. And
Yeah.
this offers a way to go beyond resilience to root zillions, which is really the framework of re-engaging with your whole self.
Mm. I definitely need a copy. And if readers want to find a copy, where can they find the book and learn more about you?
Yeah, well, you can actually buy it direct. It's on our website, rootzillions.com/
Okay.
book, and we can put that in the show notes. And we also have the leadership map, which is the fundamental tool that
Yeah.
Samantha Anderson and I, my co-author, and I developed. We can send that available, that's available for free. So if anyone wants to take their own leadership map, it's a great way to, again, identify which chakra is your area of focus. And then we do
Mm.
share in that free tool a few tips on what you can do about it.
Amazing. Amazing. To conclude us, what are maybe some practical walk away, takeaway suggestions for entrepreneurs who are struggling to let go in the right areas strategically while maintaining alignment with their vision?
Mm. I would say to really evaluate and create for yourself your own metrics of success. Getting back to this theme that you and I
Mm.
share a story around and we talked about, but
Yeah.
how much is enough and how are you enough? And
Mm-hmm.
can you measure that by getting to the root of what drives you? And there's a lot of ways you can quantify that. And, that's a big part of this work that I do. But your own
Wow.
metrics of success, your own internal validation, so that, we can't control the outcomes. We can't control if our business
Mm.
succeeds, sometimes, yes, our vision and our perseverance and grit and courage are a huge part of it, but sometimes, things just happen, and
Mm.
knowing that we're enough and making decisions from that place of trust versus making a decision from a place of scarcity or lack. That's my biggest tip, my biggest
Oh,
takeaway.
yes. So well said, too. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank
You're such a
you.
light in the world and doing incredible work and probably helping so many people in profound ways and making an impact. So thank you, Rimi, and thank you for sharing vulnerably your story and how you've transformed that into something of great purpose. It's inspiring for sure.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for your insightful questions, Jill, and for this incredible
Yeah, of
podcast.
course.
And I so appreciate being part of this. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much to everyone listening. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.